So more room for peer-to-peer learning, more room for mentoring, and movement away, I think, from thinking about the year of study as being the most important factor. So if we're thinking about a discussion point from this, I think we've got to be thinking about, among other things, how can technologies help us to best use, manage and administer personalised learning without ending up like Box of the cart horse in Animal Farm, who kept saying, I must work harder, and ended up as dog meat. So when we're talking about personalised learning, I would argue it doesn't mean palming off students with what I used to see sometimes when I worked in FE, with a kind of worksheet factory in labs where uninterested staff supervised that Sisyphean endeavour of students where they were pushing a wheel permanently uphill and never seemed to get the end of their worksheet. So as soon as you finished one worksheet, they gave you another one. And it was terribly disheartening in the places where I saw it happening, and I don't want us to just use technology-enhanced learning to do the same kind of Sisyphean labours. That is something where the students feel they're just on a treadmill, never getting away from more and more work being thrown at them. At the same time, we cannot staff and support a kind of Oxbridge model of one-to-one. And one of the things I think in this university we've had to look at is, if we really do want to offer student support, does this mean an ever-open door? And if it does that mean that you can get any of your other work done? I don't think it does mean an ever-open door. I don't think it does mean answering students' emails 24/7. I think it does mean that if you answer an individual student's email, that instead of it just going to that one student, it has to go to a website where other students can see the responses in an anonymised form. Otherwise, you just end up with the equivalent of email Wimbledon, where messages go back and forth between an individual student and their tutor without any opportunity for other students to participate, which is hugely time-intensive and not terribly productive in the long run. I don't think we're either talking about a content-free curriculum. I don't think it's just go off and find things out for yourself and we'll help you. That's not what it's about. And I don't think it means dumbing down to the lowest common denominator. Just because students at different stages in their learning are working together doesn't mean that it's got to be working at the lowest possible level. So in terms of discussion points from this, I think we're going to have to be looking at different ways of inducting students. And my question for you is, how does that induction look? What do we need to do? A little bit about students themselves. Well, what are students like nowadays? I think students are certainly more value conscious. And certainly in terms of what our students are doing, I think students are more likely to complain. They're more likely to go to law. They're more litigious. Certainly, in my experience of working in FE and HE, we're seeing more diverse students by background, by special needs, and indeed by their ambitions. They have completely different attitudes, I think, to study than maybe what they did 20 years ago. I think we're also seeing blurred distinctions between part-time and full-time students. We always say here at Leeds Met that I'm not sure there really are part-time students anymore, because most of our students are having to work at least 12, 15 hours a week. Sometimes many of our students are working full-time alongside a full-time course. And the research I've read suggests that you can get away with up to 12, 14 hours a week, particularly if it's related to the subject you're studying. So if you're working on events management and you're studying events management, that's a good idea. But more than that, it impacts quite seriously on student achievement. But we tend to treat part-time and full-time students in a way as if they're very different. And I think that's a matter to go straight back to the Funding Council and say to the Funding Council, we need to have a look at how we're financing and supporting part-time students by comparison to full-time students, and resources like loans and other kinds of support. I think we are fools again if we don't take account of what's going on in schools. Schools are changing quite dramatically nowadays, and if schools are, as it seems likely, they're going to be bringing in these diplomas that are coming in the autumn. Many students will be coming with a very different kind of experience, and we've got to make sure that we're ready for them in higher ed. And then again on this topic, How can we make sure that we manage student expectations? Because students who think that they can come and knock on your door at any time or email you at any time and get a response within a couple of hours are going to be dissatisfied. But if we have something that lays out what students can expect so that they know it isn't realistic to expect your tutor to reply to you if you email at 11, that you're not going to email them back by 1 the same night. We've got to tell them what we're going to do, manage expectations, and then I think students will understand better what it is we're trying to do. Students are going to need to understand this concept of personalised learning, I think, just as much as us tutors in FE and HE have got to do.